Hey, all you cool cats and kittens. Welcome back to the sixth online learning session for aquatic science. We're on the first week of our sixth cycle. Let's go over what we're going to be talking about today. So on the agenda for today is I just want to remind you guys that this is the first week of the 6 weeks. I want you guys to remain motivated and not to get complacent in what you know. All right. This is just kind of me pepping you up and reminding you not to slack off. So it happens usually at the end of the cycle that people start pushing really hard for all their classes, getting their work done, turning all their things in, and then you just want to take a break. And I'm asking you not to. I'm asking you to keep on that routine. Don't fall off that routine. Make sure you guys are completing these assignments every week and not falling behind. All right. Also, continue your learning. Make sure that whatever I'm teaching you, you don't stop there. If you want to learn more, keep looking on. Teach me something. Go ahead and log into Google Classroom and just kind of post something that what you learned that intrigued you about what we were talking about. So with that said, we're going to be starting a new unit. With this new 6 weeks, we're starting bony fish. This is what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about the characteristics of bony fish. We are still in the kingdom Animalia, and the phylum that we're going to be talking about is Osteichthyes. So Osteichthyes, we'll learn, means bony fish. An announcement about Edgenuity is that I'm going to try to start having office hours from 3 to 4. And it's going to be a Zoom session where I'm going to be working through some Edgenuity material. I know some people are having some trouble getting through that, and so I'm going to try to work through some live with people that want to log in. And this isn't something that's going to be required of you to show up to these office hours. This is really if you're struggling and want some help navigating through Edgenuity. I can work with you at the same time with you as we get through some material on Edgenuity, and we can kind of complete some stuff together as a group. All right, so to recap, last week we had a live session where we played a Kahoot game. It went really well. I really enjoyed seeing all your faces. I think we're going to try to repeat this when we finish this unit as well. We're going to try to have just kind of another game or some type of game that we can play at the end of this unit. I am having some ideas for a project. They haven't completely come together, but I'm going to be releasing a little teaser next week as to what it's going to be. But as far as that, just make sure that we keep on learning from now until the end of the school year. This is it. This is the final stretch for you seniors. All right, so we're going to get started with talking about the new unit, which is bony fish. And so Osteichthyes, or bony fish, you can see that we're going to be talking about two main things, which are these were going to be our warm-ups during class. And so the swim bladder was going to be one topic, and the scales, and I'm going to go ahead and try to cover those really shortly, just kind of giving you guys the main points. So the swim bladder is also called the gas bladder or air bladder. It's a flexible walled gas-filled sac. It's located on the dorsal portion of the body cavity, and this organ controls the fish's buoyancy, and in some species it's important for hearing. So neutral buoyant, I mentioned, is meaning that it's not sinking or floating. So this allows the fish to kind of maintain in a certain place within the water column. And so what happens that if the fish becomes positively buoyant and starts to float upwards, gas diffuses out of this gas gland and out of the swim bladder and into the blood. It basically diffuses into the blood. And if the fish becomes negatively buoyant and starts to sink, air enters the swim bladder through a region called the gas gland. So it has two different portions of where it goes out and in. So in through the gas gland and then out through the oval. All right, and then now on to the scales. So we're going to be talking about scales in the second portion of today's lecture. And so scales are small hard plates. They're like fingernails that cover the body for protection. The scales overlap to form a flexible armor plating to protect from predators and bruising. fish are going to have the same number of scales all their lives. As the fish grows, so do the scales grow, and they form lines like the rings on a tree as they grow. And one important thing is that biologists can use these scales to tell the age of the fish, along with other things called otoliths, and we'll talk about that a little bit later as well. And it lets them know how many years it's spent in fresh water or in salt water, just by the lines and the groups of lines on its scales. If a scale is lost, though, another scale can grow and replace it, but it will not have the growth lines in the center. So it will basically catch up to where all the other scales are. All right, so we're going to go ahead and move on. Here's some picture of the anatomically what a swim bladder looks. And here you can see how the size of the scales represented with the size of the fish. So you'll have a fry and it only has a smaller or smaller size scale, and as it gets larger it basically builds like the rings of a tree. Alright, so we're going to be starting with the prefixes, suffixes, and roots like we usually do with a new unit. So starting off we have osteo. Osteo means bone. Ichthyes means fish, so osteichthyes means bony fish. Ana means up. Cata means down. Dramus means run. Operculum means little lid. Salio means leaper. Onc means hook. Rhynch means nose. Ten means comb. Plaque means plate. Hisca means fish. Oid means like or resemble. And so we're going to start with bony fish characteristics. Alright, so the skeleton is made from bone, and they have a backbone as well. And that's what's really unique about these guys. You can see in the image of these bony fish here. They also have a lateral line which senses movement. We learned about this when we talked about sharks. And they have this organ along their side that basically, as water gets displaced, it moves these little cilia within this lateral line, and it lets them know where that water was displaced. In the case of the sharks, it tells them where a food might be, and in the case of fish, it might tell them where a predator is. They have a two-chambered heart. You can see one atria, one ventricle. Humans are going to have two atria and two ventricle, a right and a left. And you can see here in the diagram below that you have oxygen poor blood entering the atrium and then going out the ventricle, and oxygen poor blood leaves the heart and goes to the gills, where it goes to get oxygenated, and then to the rest of the body. Operculum. Operculum is the gill cover, and that's this portion right here. Alright? And we learned about this term when we were talking about mollusks. Swim bladder. And so this is what we were talking about a little bit earlier, and it's used for buoyancy. One really unique thing about the swim bladder is that when fishermen are going for fish and they're bringing up a fish from a really deep depth, what can happen is that because you're changing the depth of the fish very rapidly as you're reeling the fish in, what can happen is that this swim bladder can expand, and if it's a fish that's not of proper length for them to keep, they have to release it, because there are bag limits, and we'll be talking about these bag limits when we go over sport fishing during this unit. And what happens is that you can't release a fish, because what happens is that it remains so buoyant because that gland has been so inflated that it can't move back down to where it was in the depths, and it stays up floating. And so what we might talk about a little bit later is about proper handling, where you might have to use a venting tool. It's pretty much just a needle, and you have to puncture the side of the fish to vent the gas, and you're essentially harming the fish but allowing it to basically be able to get away from predators, because what happens when this gas gland inflates, it makes it very vulnerable to predators. Right, ectothermic. So this is temperature of organisms that is the same as the ambient temperature. Fish, like sharks, are going to have paired fins, and they are the pectoral and the pelvic fins. Apart from these two paired fins, they have the dorsal, just like the shark, the caudal, and the anal fin. Scales. Alright, so now we're going to talk about scales. You can see where there's a core, and then all these little lines coming off of it, just like a tree. Notice that there's these dark bands, and this will represent something in just a moment. So there are differences between freshwater and marine fishes. At this moment, you guys can tell me which is a freshwater and marine fish. All right, so this one is gills. Gills are used for respiration, much like the gills of sharks that we discussed, the anatomy of. The gill filaments, right here, this red portion, is going to be where oxygen exchange occurs. And you're going to have the rakers here and the arch right in between here. You can also see in this image the operculum, or the lid covering the gill filaments. All right, so here are some questions that I want you guys to work through. So what does a swim bladder do? Right, and it keeps the fish neutrally buoyant. It keeps it at a depth that it wants to be at. Where does the gas in the swim bladder come from? I mentioned this really shortly. It comes from the gas gland and it goes out the oval. And what is fusiform? So fusiform was mentioned in the sharks unit, and it's basically a tapered fish. So it is narrow on one end, narrow on the other, and then a little bit thicker in the center. And it allows it for a very maneuverable shape. And this is why a lot of fish are of fusiform shape or torpedo shape. So what does a lateral line do or sense? And it senses movement or pressure within the water. What are most fish covered in? This is an easy one. Scales. They're covered in scales. All right, moving on, we're going to talk about scales a little more, specifically the different types of scales that a fish can have. First one is cyclo, which is wheel or circle, placo, which means plate, and ten means comb, oid means like or resemble. So if we combine these prefixes with this suffix, so cycloid, placoid, or tenoid, we pretty much are done here for today. We got the three types of scales. So this is a diagrammatic representation of the relationship between annual growth of a fish's body in relation to its scales. So in its first year, it's going to have a small scale, and as it grows, it gets bigger, and so on and so forth. This is an actual image of a scale, of it showing the years of life. And this is how scientists can tell how much it grows within that time. So going on to the first type of scale is placoid scales. So we know what these are. Placoid scales are dermal denticles. We learned about these when we were talking about sharks and rays, and they are these right here. They have this little razor-like shape. And the next one is tenoid scales. So tenoid scales are tooth-edged, and they add concentric layers as they grow. And they're usually found on fish with spiny fin rays such as bass or crappie. And you can see here you have a bass and a crappie right there. Next is the tenoid, which is like a comb because of these little spikes right here. It looks just like a comb. Next is cycloid scales. So they have a smooth edge. They add concentric layers as they grow. They are most common on fish with soft fin rays such as salmon and carp. And they have an overlapping pattern. So cycloid like a circle. Very simple to remember, cycloid like a circle. And here are those salmon and carp pictures, salmon and carp. Next is ganoid. They are diamond-shaped, shiny, and hard, and they can be found on gars, bichers, and reed fishes. And here's a gar and a reed bicher, sorry. And they're very similar looking. All of them are going to be this really elongated type of fish, and they're very diamond shaped. You can see that here, and they're very tough. Next we have the cosmoid scales, and these are very different. They have hard enamel-like outer layers and an inner layer of a cosmine, and it's like a form of dentin, like what's made out of tooth, and then a layer of vascular bone found in lungfish and coelacanths, and these are very ancient types of fish. As a fish grows, each scale becomes larger, and the new bone is added to the basal layers. And here's that picture of those cosmoid scales. Here are these lungfish right here. All right, so can you tell me which one this is right here? If you said tenoid, that's correct. Can you tell me which one this is? If you said ganoid, that's correct.